Hello dear viewer, and welcome to this chatty draw with me. My name is Cordelia, and today I want to tell you all about my new favorite book while I draw some of the characters. So sit down, maybe grab a nice warm cup of something sweet, and if you feel like drawing along with me, grab your medium of choice and let's get started. But, of course, no pressure. Okay, so before we begin, I want to apologize if I throw in any vocal fry. I have a tendency to speak almost exclusively in vocal fry when I'm with my friends, but I know that some people find that obnoxious, so I'll try to keep my voice nice and dulcet for you, but if you hear some vocal fry and it bothers you personally, I kindly ask that you just click away from this video instead of posting about how horrible my voice is. Thank you! Moving on, as you can probably discern from the title of this video, today we're going to be talking about A Lady's Guide to Scandal by Sophie Irwin. Irwin? I'm not sure how you pronounce it. This is, I believe, her second book, and I think her debut novel was A Lady's Guide to Fortune Hunting, which I also absolutely adored, though if I'm being honest, I definitely think that A Lady's Guide to Scandal is the better of the two. That's just my opinion, though. I'm going to try and keep this review as spoiler-free as possible because I want you to read this book so bad. So, if I include any spoilers, I'll be sure to warn you so you can skip. I am going to draw a scene from the novel as I talk, but I wouldn't really consider it to be a spoiler, so I think you should be okay. Okay, so moving on to the actual, premise of the novel, that's the word I was looking for. A Lady's Guide to Scandal is set in Regency England, and it follows the story of 27-year-old Eliza Somerset, formerly Eliza Balfour. And okay, what I'm about to say sounds like spoilers, but I promise it isn't. It's just the premise of the book. Basically all the following information is revealed in the first 2 or 3 chapters, so you're not really, getting spoiled for, it's just the plot of the book. It's just the premise of the book, I promise. So the book opens with the reading of the will of Eliza's deceased husband, and he was this powerful man, but he was really mediocre, and he was an even more mediocre husband who was 25 years older than Eliza, so we're not really sad about his passing. But Eliza is very nervous about this reading of the will, and we soon learn that it's because she was actually in love with her husband's nephew, Oliver Somerset, who we will be referring to as just Somerset for the remainder of this video. So Eliza and Somerset planned to get married, but her mother pushed her into a more advantageous marriage, forcing her to turn her back on Somerset. So Somerset ran away to the Navy after Eliza agreed to marry his uncle, which I think is understandable, but now he's re-emerged as the heir to the title that Eliza's husband held, so now he's Lord Somerset. So through this reading of the will, we learn that Eliza's crappy ex-husband has unexpectedly left her some estates, meaning that she now has an annual income amounting to about £10,000 a year, which was a lot of money in that time. However, she only owns these estates so long as she brings no dishonor to the Somerset name. Eliza still has feelings for the new Lord Somerset, and as she thinks he's still upset with her over the whole "you married my uncle" thing, she decides to take her fortune and her best friend Margaret, and they retreat to Bath until the end of her mourning. That's mourning with a U, because this is still the 1800s. But along the way, Eliza encounters the infamous Lord Melville, who also ends up in Bath for the winter. And that basically is the setup for the novel. The rest of the book centers Eliza and her kind of learning to make decisions for herself, and then also lots of yearning, of course. The whole thing is very Bridgerton, although it's pretty PG. If I saw a 14-year-old reading this, I would be like, that's fine. There's no, explicit scenes or anything. Okay, so obviously I have a lot of feelings about this book, so I want to talk about the things I really loved first. And there are so many things I could talk about, but I'm going to limit myself to the major points. So the main thing is that though there are definitely some tropes in this novel, it felt pretty original. The story kept me guessing, especially at the beginning. And I was really surprised because I saw online a lot of people were saying that they felt like this novel was predictable. And I mean, I could see the direction the story was going in, but it didn't, things still surprised me. For about the first half of the book, I genuinely had no idea who she was going to end up with. That is something in this book that could be a turnoff for you. There is a love triangle, and usually I hate love triangles, to the extent that I'll DNF a book just because there's a useless love triangle, but I didn't feel like this love triangle was useless. I actually think it really worked well in this context because it was kind of essential to the plot, and it made the story more compelling. Like, the story was kind of set up around there being a love triangle, and like the title of the novel is literally A Lady's Guide to Scandal, so like it's like an integral part of the novel. It's not just something sprinkled in to add a little bit of spice, you know, like it was done intentionally, and so it felt good to me. Sophie did a really good job of making both the love interests feel like real people, in my opinion. Like, they both genuinely have good points, and I understand why Eliza has feelings for both of them. However, Sophie does a really good job of steering you in the direction of one character. Like, they have such good banter, and like that's usually my biggest problem with love triangles, is that they try to make both of the love interests equally viable options until the very last chapter to keep you reading like, oh, who's she gonna choose? And then in the end, they always end up going for the wrong guy. Always. Like, the second male lead is better in almost every single love triangle I've ever encountered, but this book doesn't have that problem because Sophie makes sure the reader is also invested in the right guy. And let me tell you, I was so invested. And another thing I loved about this story was Eliza and Margaret's friendship. A lot of girl friendships, in romance novels especially, kind of just feel like, oh, let's just talk about boys exclusively to advance the romance storyline. And then sometimes I feel like there are these weird, disjointed conversations between female characters thrown into the book for the sole purpose of passing the Bechdel test. But though Eliza and Margaret do spend a decent amount of time talking about their respective love interests, I didn't really mind it because I felt like their friendship felt like a real friendship. Like, girls talk to their friends about their love interests, like that's so real. It would be really weird if Eliza and Margaret didn't talk about the literal reason they're in Bath. But beyond that, Eliza and Margaret support each other in their other endeavors. Like, there's this really good passage later in the book where Eliza and Margaret are talking about the people that they're in love with. But beyond that, they talk about like what it would mean if they chose that path, like the consequences, for example, like people would talk, but also like the heavier implications of like how that might impact the way they're viewed in society. I don't know, it just felt really genuine to me, like a conversation you would actually have with your friend. And then also, I feel like a lot of the time in books, the best friend character just tirelessly supports the main character, and then the main character only occasionally acknowledges the best friend's existence. Like, they don't do anything for their friends, which just is so weird. That's not how real relationships work. But Eliza and Margaret support each other. Like, they both do things to help each other, so the friendship felt really mutual and fleshed out, especially towards the back half of the novel. And Eliza's literally like, I'd support her financially if she chose a life her family didn't approve of. And like, that's just so cute. They're so cute. I really loved their friendship. I also loved the prose in this novel. The language wasn't really like super updated. Like, it was definitely updated for a modern audience for sure, but it wasn't like it's not like it reads like Pride and Prejudice, you know, but the writing isn't so updated that it took me out of the story, unlike some books that I won't name. Like, I really hate when like historical romance novels have like modern day swear words in them. Like, it just feels really weird to me, but like the writing in this book wasn't so updated that it took me out of the story. Like, I really enjoyed the writing, and it was also really funny. Like, I was laughing out loud, which was really embarrassing when I was reading in public. I don't know if it would be everyone's type of humor, but I thought that Melville and Margaret were especially funny. And it was also so romantic. Like, there were some lines and scenes in there where I had to put the book down and go punch pillows because, oh my god, it just had me kicking my feet and giggling like a little schoolgirl. It was so good. Like, I mean, of course I'm all for those like huge, big romantic love confessions, but like the way that these love confessions were so like simple but genuine, like the yearning was so good. Like, this is some of the best yearning I've read in a while. It was a really good slow burn. I don't know, I really enjoyed it. And like, even aside from the romance, there were just some absolute bangers in the book. Like, for example, there's this reoccurring line in the novel that's kind of in regards to creating work, whether it be like writing or painting or like whatever is meaningful to you. And in this specific instance, they're talking about Eliza's painting, and Eliza's like, it's just for me, but that does not make it any less worthwhile. And I just think that that's such a wonderful way to think about the things that you make, you know, because I feel like in this capitalist society that we live in, we're so pressured to like make things for other people, you know, make things to sell, make things to post online. Like, it's never just like making things for you because you enjoy it, you know. So I really, really loved that line, and I loved that kind of theme throughout the book. Okay, I just have one more passage that I want to share with you all. This one is a little bit spoilery, so maybe skip ahead to the time posted on the screen, but it really resonated with me, so I just want to share it with you. The difficult thing with acts of bravery, in Eliza's opinion, was that they did not feel nearly as good as one might imagine. In fact, in the aftermath, one could feel quite as guilt-ridden and as nervous and dreadful as one did after an act of cowardice. Only almost, however, for underneath it all, underneath the fear of what was to come, the concern that her family might never forgive her, Eliza could be reassured by one small kernel of satisfaction. Even if this turned out to be the most egregious mistake of her life, at least it would be one that she had chosen, rather than one that had been chosen for her. I don't know, that just feels like such a banger to me. So the last good thing I want to talk about is Melville and Caroline, his sister. So the Melvilles are Indian and British, like their father was a British earl or something. I'm too lazy to fact check that. But he ran away to India where he met their mother, and then eventually they came back to England. But I really loved the way that this was worked into the story. And I mean, like, obviously I'm white, so I probably don't have as nuanced an opinion on this as I could. But I'm always all for bringing characters of color into, like, all kinds of stories. However, sometimes I do feel like it feels forced. Like, if the story is kind of fantasy-like or very fictional, we don't need to justify there being people of color in the story. So for example, this isn't anything that hasn't been said before, but in season 1 of Bridgerton, they weirdly tried to justify why there were people of color there and why they could marry freely between races. And then in Queen Charlotte, they also tried to backpedal and like further explain. And I mean, I really liked Queen Charlotte, but they didn't need to do all that. It's fine. We can have a little suspension of disbelief as a treat. And if you want to talk about themes of racism, you should probably be telling a different story. Maybe in a setting where we aren't retconning history and glorifying colonizers. Anyway, all that is to say, I felt like the inclusion, specifically of Indian characters, was a way to include people of color into this story that didn't make it feel like a magical world where racism doesn't exist, but also it didn't feel forced. The Melvilles do talk about how they've had a more difficult time and how they're always more harshly criticized than if they were white, and we do see instances of this throughout the book, like it's not just completely brushed over. I feel like since this book was written by a white author, it was done as elegantly as it could be in the context of its creation, but I would love to know your opinions on all that. I do know Sophie did a decent amount of research for this book. She wrote in her little like author's blurb in the back of the book that she had done research on Indian people who lived in Regency England, and I feel like that does show in the novel. I don't know though. Your thoughts would be appreciated, as obviously there might have been things that I missed. I do think it would have been nice if we could have seen more of their culture integrated into the story, but I also understand the decision not to do so. I feel like it could have come off as offensive or like performative if it was done incorrectly. And also, I suppose they're living in a society which requires them to assimilate in order to survive. I don't know. I thought overall it was well done, but I would love to know your thoughts. Okay, so moving on to things I didn't like. This is going to be quite a bit shorter. I had 3 things that I was a bit meh about, and 2 are quite spoilery, so I'll be sure to warn you when that's coming up. So the first thing is that the ending felt just the tiniest bit rushed. I think I would have loved just like one more chapter of fluff after we got our final couples, but I do understand that that's a pretty fine line to walk, and it's easy to make the ending feel like it drags on. Like, we all know we're here for the yearning anyway, not the resolution, so it didn't really bother me that much. I think it just means that I really liked the novel a lot, because that's how I always feel about books that I liked. The other 2 points are quite spoilery, so I'll go over them quickly, and if you want to avoid them, just mute until this symbol is gone, or skip ahead to the time written on the screen. Okay, so first, I didn't really have a big problem with this, but I know some people said that Eliza was cheating, and a lot of people tagged this book with infidelity, but like, I felt like this was debatable, because Eliza hadn't realized or acknowledged her true feelings until after she finished the portrait of Melville, at which point she immediately stopped any advances she felt from him. Like, she's obviously in love with him from our perspective because we have that extra context as a reader, and also we know that this is a romance novel, but she still hasn't come to that realization herself. So she wants to be close with him because they're friends. In her mind, she's only ever loved Somerset, so all these flirtations with Melville don't feel like anything more than friendly teasing to her. And she doesn't think he's serious at first either. I do agree that it's kind of a gray area, but ultimately it didn't really bother me, and I wouldn't really consider it to be cheating. However, if you've ever been cheated on, I could understand how it might be upsetting to you. Personally, I have been cheated on before, and it didn't really bother me. I just kind of felt stressed for Eliza. Yeah, it's a gray area, but it's not like blatant cheating like some people tag it. The other thing I wasn't a huge fan of was the whole Melville was part of a scheme to ruin Eliza plot twist. I mean, like, we knew something was coming, of course, and I didn't especially hate that this plot point was included. I just wish the timing was different. I know that for most of the people that didn't like this book, this is part of what did it for them, and that's fair. I mean, like, it made sense to me in retrospect. I just wish that we had gotten, like, some more hints throughout the story other than just Somerset being like, oh, don't trust Melville, if you knew what I knew, blah, blah, blah. Because, like, by that point in the novel, we don't really like Somerset all that much anyway, so we're not really inclined to believe him. I just wanted some more, like, hints throughout the story that came from more reputable sources, you know, so that we would actually have, like, a little bit of a feeling of unease. It didn't ruin the story for me at all, but it did kind of come out of nowhere in my opinion. I think the only reason people might say that it was predictable is because betrayal is a common trope that already exists in romance, but I didn't think there was any hinting or foreshadowing in the text that would have, like, actually made me see this specific plot twist coming. But anyway, those are my good points and my bad points. Overall, I loved this book. I absolutely devoured it over the course of like 3 days, which is very fast for me since I work a full-time job. I personally gave it 5 stars. I know not everyone would feel the same way, but in my eyes, it was basically perfect. I can't wait until my absolutely terrible memory deletes most of the details of this book so I can reread it. But I want to know what you thought about this book. I'd love to know your thoughts, any quotes you really liked, anything you didn't like. I've been absolutely frothing at the mouth wanting to talk to people about this book, so please, please, please talk to me. And if you have any recommendations for books similar to this one, please let me know. If you watched this far, thank you. I appreciate you, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Bye-bye.